A shattered basil pot reveals more than soil. Welcome to Wolfe's Casebook. I am your host, Enigma. Comment with your location. Your support keeps these stories alive. Let's uncover it. Silence in the kitchen hides a darker truth. Welcome to Wolfe's Casebook. I am your host, Enigma. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. I value every response. Let's investigate. If you want to know how trouble gets into a respectable house, and it doesn't always climb in through a window with a jimmy and a snarl. Sometimes it comes in neatly wrapped with string around it, carried by a man who keeps apologizing as if he's delivering a dead relative instead of a parcel. It was 11:30 on a Thursday, late morning, which in the brownstone is a time officially reserved for two things: Wolfe's orchids and Wolfe's peace. The orchids get the sunroom, and the peace gets everything else. I was at my desk in the office, her feet hooked on the bottom drawer, making a dent in a stack of correspondence that Wolfe considered beneath contempt, but not beneath assignment. Fritz was in the kitchen doing something that smelled like either virtue or sin, and upstairs I could hear the faint, faraway clink that meant Wolfe was among his flowers, being tyrannical to plants that never talked back. The doorbell rang. That alone didn't make it unusual. New York is full of people who ring bells, salesmen, evangelists, and process servers, and the occasional lunatic who thinks Nero Wolfe is a folk remedy. What made it unusual was the timing. Nobody serious comes before noon unless they're desperate or stupid. The desperate can sometimes be profitable. The stupid are always noisy. I got up, went through the hall, and opened the front door to find a thin man with a careful haircut and a face that looked like it had once been confident but had been corrected by experience. He held a brown paper parcel under one arm, like a book he wasn't sure he was allowed to read. "Mr. Goodwin?" he asked, as if there might be another Archie Goodwin hiding behind the umbrella stand. "That's me. You're early." He smiled the way people do when they're not sure whether they're being insulted. I didn't know your hours. Neither do some of the people who live here. Come in. Who are you?" He stepped inside as though the threshold required permission from a higher power, and that was good. It meant he understood the brownstone's religion. "My name is Calvin Sloane," he said. "I work for, well, I suppose I worked for the Bleecker Herb Company." I took the parcel from his arm because it looked like he'd drop it if a gust of air spoke sharply. It had weight and a faint smell, like crushed greenery in a warm hand. "Bleecker Herb," I said. "That sounds wholesome. You sell little jars to people who want their soup to feel important." His mouth tightened. "We import. We blend, we package. We have clients, restaurants, specialty shops, some fairly prominent." "Sure. Everybody eats." He swallowed. "I need to see Mr. Wolfe." I looked him over. No bulge at the waist, no twitchy eyes, no red knuckles. Not a thug. Not a cop. Just a man with a problem that had started living in his lungs. "Mr. Wolfe is occupied," I said. "But I can take a message, or I can decide whether you're worth interrupting him for. Those are the two services I offer for free." He stared at the parcel in my hands as though it might suddenly speak for him. It's about that." "Then it's a jar of basil with a criminal record?" His eyes flicked up. "You're making fun of me." "Not yet. I'm just warming up. Come on." I led him toward the office. If Wolfe decided not to see him, I could still put him on the yellow chair and wring him like a towel. In the office, I waved him to the chair facing my desk and sat down. The house was quiet in that way it gets when it's holding its breath. I opened the parcel just enough to confirm what my nose already knew. Inside was a heavy ceramic pot, about the size of a grapefruit packed in paper. It was the kind of pot you'd put on a windowsill with a plant that likes attention. Except this one had been broken clean through the middle and glued back together, badly. A jagged crack ran down the side like a scar, and the smell coming off it wasn't just basil, but it was basil with something else. Something sharp and faintly metallic. "Nice," I said. "You brought us a wounded houseplant." "It's not. There isn't a plant," Sloane said quickly. "There was, but it's the pot. This pot. I see that. What do you want, Mr. Sloane? And try to do it in sentences that don't faint halfway through." He took a breath and then another, as if his words had to be coaxed out with oxygen. "2 weeks ago, our company prepared a private blend for a client. Not unusual, but the order was special. It was supposed to be delivered in person to a residence, not shipped. The owner insisted it be placed in a particular ceramic basil pot." I looked at the crack again. "This one?" He nodded. "Yes. Why would anyone insist on a particular pot?" "That's one of the things I need to know." His hands gripped the chair arms. "I handled the delivery myself." "Because you're conscientious?" "Because my supervisor told me to. And because I had a key." That got my attention. "A key to what?" "To the residence," he said. "A brownstone. Not this one. Another. The client's house. The instructions were explicit. No conversation, no acknowledgement. I was to enter through the kitchen door, place the pot on a specific shelf, and leave. Sounds like a spy novel with fewer explosions." He blinked. "I did it. I placed the pot. Then I left." "And then?" 3 days later, Sloane said, "So the client's attorney contacted our company. He asked who had access to the blend, who handled delivery, and whether we used anything besides herbs." I leaned back. "That's when you got nervous." Sloane's voice tightened. "The client is in serious trouble. Not with the police. Not yet. But with people who don't call attorneys until they want a record of something. People who want proof," I said. He nodded hard. "And yesterday, my supervisor fired me. For incompetence, for violating proprietary handling procedures. It's nonsense, but he was angry in a way that didn't fit. Then he told me to forget the pot, and forget the blend, and forget the client, or I'd regret having a memory." I whistled softly. "That's a little theatrical for the herb business." Sloane's eyes were shiny. "I went back to the client's house. I shouldn't have, but I did, and I used the key I still had." "You're full of good decisions." "The kitchen shelf was empty," he said. "I searched. I found the pot in a trash bin, broken, like this. But when I touched it, when I picked it up, my fingers—" He stopped, swallowing. "You found something on it," I said. "Yes." I got up, fetched a magnifying glass from my drawer, and bent over the crack. There, along the edge of dried glue, a faint smear had dried into a dark line. It wasn't much, but it didn't look like basil juice. "Deep blood?" I asked. "I don't know," Sloane said. "I didn't take it to a lab. I brought it here." I held the pot up and sniffed again. Basil, sure. But under it, something like iron and stale sweetness. Not enough to convict anyone, but enough to make your instincts itch. "And who is the client?" I asked. Sloane hesitated. "I was told not to say. Then you were also told to forget the pot and forget the blend. You're already disobeying instructions. So pick a lane." He exhaled. Her name is Lila Brodsky." That name made a small bell ring in my head. Not a big bell, no headlines. But a social bell, the kind that rings at charity dinners and on the society pages when somebody donates a fortune to a museum and expects a plaque. "Brodsky," I said. "The Food World Brodskys." "The Brodsky Foundation," he said. "Her husband is dead. She runs the estate." "Runs it like a business or like a battlefield?" "I don't know," he said, looking miserable. "But I know this. After I found the broken pot, someone was in the house with me. I heard footsteps upstairs. I got out. I left the pot in my car. When I got home, There was a note in my mailbox that said, "Return what you stole." I let that sit between us for a moment, like a cigar in a room that doesn't smoke. "All right," I said. "Now we have theft, intimidation, and a broken basil pot with possible blood. And that's the part where I go upstairs and tell Wolfe." "No," a voice said from the doorway. "You have already told me." I turned. Wolfe stood there, enormous and motionless, occupying the door frame the way a statue occupies a niche. He had the look he gets when he's been interrupted and has decided that the interruption might be worth remembering. His eyes were half-lidded, but they were sharp enough to shave. He came in slowly, not hurrying, not reacting to Sloane's startled scramble to his feet. Wolfe never rewarded nervousness. "Mr. Sloane," Wolfe said, and the man's name sounded heavier in his mouth. "You brought a pot." Sloane nodded, mute. Wolfe's gaze went to the crack, the smear, the glued seam, then to me. "Archie. He says it was used for a private herb blend delivery," I told him. "He had a key. The client is Lila Brodsky. Pot was later found broken in a trash bin. Someone is accusing him of stealing it." Wolfe's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in calculation. "A pot," he said again, as if the word had a taste he was trying to identify. "Basil, you say?" "It smells like it," I said. "Plus a little something extra." Wolfe's nostrils flared once, a minimal concession to his senses. "Bring it here." I carried the pot over and placed it on the corner of Wolfe's desk. He did not touch it. He leaned forward slightly, examining the crack as though it were a sentence with bad grammar. "Ceramic," he murmured. "Handmade. Not inexpensive. Aye, and it has been repaired with a vulgar adhesive." He looked at Sloane. "Why did you bring it to me?" Sloane's voice came out thin. Because I don't know what else to do. If I go to the police, I'll be blamed. If I do nothing, I'll be threatened. I thought, Mr. Wolfe, I thought you'd know how to see what's in front of us." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "I see what is in front of me. A broken pot, an anxious man, and the odor of irrationality. That is not yet a case. Whilst that is a nuisance." Sloane's face fell. I said, "Wolfe." He raised a finger at me. "One moment, Archie. Mr. Sloane, you said your supervisor fired you and then threatened you. Who is your supervisor?" "Eamon Klein," Sloane said quickly. "Operations manager." Wolfe nodded once, storing it away. "And you have a key to Mrs. Brodsky's residence?" "Yes. You will give it to Archie. Now." Sloane reached into his pocket like a man surrendering a weapon and produced a brass key on a small plain ring. I took it. Wolfe continued, calm as a banker. "You will also tell Archie the address, the delivery instructions, the names of every person who knew of this special blend, and the exact composition of the blend." Sloane blinked. You're taking it?" Wolfe regarded him. "No. I'm considering whether to take it. There is a difference. However," his eyes flicked to the pot again, "someone has committed an offense that includes my least favorite element, intrusion. And that pot was intended to convey secrecy into a private home. It has failed in its duty and has been punished for it. I dislike incompetence." That made me stare. Wolfe had a way of selecting his reasons like a chef selecting spices, not for the benefit of the audience, but for the integrity of the dish. He looked at me. "Archie, you will go at once to Mrs. Brodsky's residence. You will not enter it without invitation." I opened my mouth. He lifted his brows. "You will obtain invitation." "Sure," I said. "I'll knock politely and ask if I can come in and inspect their trash." Wolfe ignored that. "You will also see this man Klein. You will see him today. You will observe him and you will listen. And you will bring Saul Panzer into this matter if you detect surveillance, or if you do not." Sloane's eyes widened at the name as if it were a weapon. I can pay, he said. Not much, but... Wolfe's gaze settled on him with quiet finality. Look, you will pay my fee. You will pay it promptly. And you will do precisely as you are instructed. He leaned back in his chair in his office, in his kingdom. The brownstone had been disturbed by a broken basil pot, and Wolfe's eyes, which had looked half asleep a minute ago, were now fully awake. I took the key, the pot, and Sloane's trembling list of details as he started talking, and I felt the house shift around us, subtly, like a chessboard when the first pawn moves. Trouble hadn't climbed in through a window. It had been carried in, wrapped in brown paper, smelling faintly of basil and something a lot less innocent. Sloane talked for 20 minutes without once looking at Wolfe again. That was smart. Once Wolfe settles into silence, you either fill it or drown in it. Sloane chose filling. I took notes, though not because I needed to. Writing things down makes people believe they're important. It also gives them time to contradict themselves. The blend, Sloane said, twisting his fingers together, was labeled internally as B17. That's not unusual. We code custom orders, but B17 wasn't a normal culinary mix. It was very specific. Specific how? I asked. It was predominantly basil, yes, but with crushed fennel seed, a trace of dried tarragon, and a proprietary oil infusion that Mr. Klein insisted be added only at the last moment. Oil, I said. Yes, just a few drops. He handled that part himself. Wolfe's eyelids lowered further. Proprietary, he murmured. Meaning secret. Yes, sir. And was this oil documented? Sloane hesitated. Not formally. It was kept in a small amber vial in Mr. Klein's desk drawer. Locked? Yes. Who had access? Only him. Wolfe made a small sound in his throat. That meant the first piece of the pattern had settled into place. I could almost hear the click. And Mrs. Brodsky, Wolfe said. What were her instructions beyond the location of the pot? She insisted that it be placed on the second shelf to the left of the kitchen window. Exactly there. No receipt, no conversation. She wasn't home when I delivered it. You're certain? I rang once before using the key. No answer. And the key? I asked. How did you get it? It was mailed to the company with the order. Plain envelope, no return address. Inside was the key and a typed card with instructions. After delivery, I was to return the key by courier, but I delayed. Why? I said. He swallowed. Because it felt wrong, the whole thing. I kept the key overnight, thinking I might ask questions. Then the attorney called, and everything spiraled. Wolfe's eyes flicked open slightly. You're either a fool or honest, Mr. Sloane. The distinction is often temporary. Sloane's mouth worked, but no sound came out. I glanced at the clock. It was close to noon, so the house had shifted from morning quiet to anticipatory silence, the kind that settles before lunch. Fritz would be plating something refined and potentially lethal to modest appetites. Wolfe, I said, if I'm going to see Brodsky and Klein today, I'd better move. He nodded once. You will report before dinner. Sloane half rose. Should I? You, Wolfe said, will go home. You will behave normally. If anyone contacts you, you will inform Archie immediately. I do not improvise. Sloane nodded vigorously. I walked him to the door. He looked back once at the office, at Wolfe's bulk behind the desk, as if expecting a benediction. He didn't get one. When I shut the door, the brownstone exhaled. I went back to the office. Wolfe was staring at the pot as though it might confess if he waited long enough. You're interested, I said. I'm irritated, he corrected. The intrusion was intentional. Meaning, the use of a key mailed anonymously, the insistence on placement, the proprietary oil added in secrecy. This is not culinary whimsy. It is design. You think the pot was a delivery system? I think, Wolfe said evenly, that someone wished to introduce something into Mrs. Brodsky's household under the guise of herbs. Whether that something was poison, signal, or leverage remains to be seen. Signal? He steepled his fingers. Basil is not merely a plant, Archie. In certain traditions, it symbolizes love, wealth, protection, and in others, it is used in ritual. Ritual, I said dryly. You're not suggesting occult sabotage in a Manhattan kitchen. I'm suggesting, he said, that symbols are tools, and tools are chosen deliberately. That was Wolfe. Give him a cracked pot and he'll give you philosophy. I grabbed my hat and the key. I'll start with Brodsky. He closed his eyes. Dismissal. The Brodsky residence was 8 blocks south and 3 east of ours, another brownstone but of a different temperament. And where ours was dignified and self-contained, this one wore its wealth like a tailored coat. The stoop had been recently scrubbed. The brass gleamed with vanity. I rang. A woman in her late 40s opened the door. Tall, composed, dark hair pulled back without softness. She looked at me the way people look at invoices. Yes? Archie Goodwin. I'd like to speak with Mrs. Lila Brodsky. I am Mrs. Brodsky. Good. Saves time. Her gaze sharpened. What is this regarding? A basil pot. For the first time, something flickered across her face. Not fear, recognition. I don't entertain solicitors, she said. I'm not selling. I'm returning. I held up the key between 2 fingers. She stared at it for a long second, then stepped aside. Come in. The kitchen was immaculate. White tile, stainless steel, the kind of order that makes you wonder what chaos it's compensating for. My eyes went automatically to the shelf left of the window. It was empty. You received a custom herb blend from Bleecker Herb Company, I said. Yes. And you had it delivered in a ceramic basil pot. Yes. And now it's missing. She didn't blink. It was removed. By whom? I don't know. That's interesting, I said, because the man who delivered it found the pot in your trash bin. Broken. Her jaw tightened just enough to be noticeable. He had no right to enter my home. He had a key. One you mailed. Her silence confirmed it. Why the secrecy, Mrs. Brodsky? She walked to the counter and rested her hands on it. They were steady. Because I didn't want it known that I was conducting a private evaluation. Of herbs? Of loyalty. Now that was something. Care to elaborate? I asked. My late husband built the Brodsky Foundation on food importation. Spices. Specialty goods. Since his death, there have been internal tensions. Partners who believe they deserve more control, and his suppliers who think they can renegotiate from a position of strength. And the basil? I suspected that someone within my own staff was tampering with our shipments, diluting blends, substituting inferior ingredients. So I arranged a private order, outside normal channels, to test whether the product would arrive untouched. And it did not. I leaned against the counter. Untouched how? She met my eyes directly. The aroma was wrong. That was either madness or expertise. You're telling me you can smell sabotage? I'm telling you, she said coolly, that the blend delivered to me did not match the specifications I provided. Which were? Pure basil, minimal fennel, no oil infusion. I felt something tighten in my head. No oil, I said. No. And yet the blend delivered included a proprietary oil added by the operations manager. Her gaze sharpened again. Who told you that? The man you're accusing of theft. I am not accusing him of theft, she said. I am investigating betrayal. And you broke the pot? Yes. Why? Because once I confirmed the blend was compromised, I no longer required the container. That's a little dramatic for a kitchen accessory. She stepped closer. Mr. Goodwin, if someone in my organization is willing to tamper with product integrity, they are willing to do worse. I broke the pot because I didn't want it reused. With blood on it? Her eyes didn't flicker this time. Blood. I watched her carefully, and if she was acting, she deserved an award. There was a smear along the crack, I said. Possibly blood. That is absurd. Maybe, I said. Or maybe someone cut themselves while repairing it. I did not repair it. And you didn't throw it out yourself? I instructed my housekeeper to dispose of it. Name? Marina Kovacs. Still employed? Yes. Where is she? Off today. Convenient. And who else knew about this private order? I asked. My personal assistant, Daniel Rourke. I and my attorney, Philip Dent. Anyone else? She hesitated. No. Not your operations manager. I did not inform Mr. Klein directly. The order was placed through a secondary contact. That was interesting. Sloane had said Klein personally added the oil. Mrs. Brodsky, I said gently, if you didn't authorize oil and Klein added it without your knowledge, that's not tampering with your shipment. That's something else. Her lips pressed thin. Meaning? Meaning someone wanted that oil in your kitchen. Silence stretched between us, heavy as Wolfe's desk. Do you believe it was dangerous? She asked finally. I believe, I said, that someone is playing a layered game, and I don't like games where the rules aren't clear. She straightened. What do you want from me? Access, I said, to your staff, to your housekeeper, to the shelf where the pot sat, and a list of anyone who might benefit from your loss of credibility. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Why? Because you hired us, I said smoothly. I did no such thing. You mailed a key. That's as good as a retainer. For a moment, I thought she'd throw me out. Then, slowly, she nodded. You have 24 hours, she said. After that, I will pursue my own remedies. I don't doubt it. As I left, I took one more look at the empty shelf. Sunlight streamed through the window, thus illuminating dust where the pot had once sat. If something had been intended to act from that spot, whether poison or message, it had been positioned precisely. Outside, I checked my watch. Early afternoon. Next stop, Eamon Klein. The Bleecker Herb Company occupied a narrow storefront with ambitions. The display window was arranged with artful jars and handwritten labels meant to imply tradition. Inside, the air was thick with scent, oregano, thyme, dried citrus peel, and a man in his 30s stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He looked up as I entered. His eyes were sharp and appraising. Can I help you? He asked. I'm looking for Eamon Klein. You found him? I smiled. Good. Saves time. His gaze flicked over me. We're not hiring. I'm not applying. I'm investigating. His expression didn't change. That alone made him interesting. Investigating what? He asked. A basil pot. That earned me the faintest crease between his brows. I'm afraid we sell many, he said evenly. This one was special, I said. Private order, coded B17. For the first time, something hardened behind his eyes. I don't discuss client orders. You already did, I said. You added oil. His jaw tightened. Who told you that? Let's just say your former employee, Calvin Sloane, is worried. Klein's mouth curled slightly. Sloane is incompetent. He says you threatened him. I dismissed him for violating procedure. By delivering exactly as instructed? Klein stepped around the counter. He was taller than me by an inch, which meant nothing, but sometimes people think it does. You have no authority here, he said quietly. I have curiosity, I replied. And curiosity tends to collect authority. He folded his arms. What do you want? The oil, I said. What was in it? A proprietary blend. Of? Essential extracts, stabilizers. Anything toxic? His lips thinned. Absolutely not. You're sure? Yes. Then you won't mind if we test it. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he said, "You don't have it." "Maybe not," I said. "But I have something better. And that is time," I said. "And a man who hates being manipulated." For the first time, Klein looked uncertain. I let that hang, then tipped my hat and walked out. Soon on the sidewalk, I paused. Across the street, a man stood pretending to study a newspaper. He'd been there when I entered. He was still there. He wasn't reading. I turned the corner casually and kept walking. Half a block later, footsteps followed. Wolfe had said to bring Saul Panzer into it if I detected surveillance, or if I did not. I smiled to myself. The basil pot had cracked more than ceramic. It had fractured a quiet arrangement of trust. And someone, somewhere, I was watching to see how the pieces would fall. I didn't sprint. Sprinting is for people who want to be noticed, or people who are late for a funeral. I just kept walking at the same pace, letting the city do what it does best, swallow shapes and spit them out a block later wearing different faces. At the next corner I stopped, looked down at my shoe like it had offended me, and bent to retie the lace. That's one of the oldest tricks in the book because it forces the other fellow to make a decision. Pass you, stop, or pretend he's tying his own shoes. The man with the newspaper slowed, hesitated, and then kept going without looking at me. He passed my shoulder close enough that I could smell tobacco and cheap aftershave. He wasn't a professional. A professional doesn't smell like he's been leaning into strangers all day. When I straightened up, he was already 50 feet ahead, still holding the paper open. That was his mistake. Nobody reads a paper in motion anymore unless they're trying to convince somebody else they do. I took the next right, then another, then crossed mid-block on a whim. He turned in behind me a beat later. Not quick enough to be sharp, but too consistent to be coincidence. All right, I thought. Someone wants to know where I go next. If it was Klein, he'd picked a sloppy tail. If it wasn't Klein, then Klein might be a pawn. And I'd seen enough pawns today to start a chess club. There was a payphone outside a deli, one of the few remaining artifacts of civilization. I stepped into the doorway like I was deciding between pastrami and regret, lifted the receiver, and dialed Saul Panzer's number from memory. Wolfe keeps Saul on retainer the way some people keep aspirin. Saul answered on the second ring. "Panzer." "Archie," I said. "You busy?" A pause. "That depends. I've got a man with a newspaper following me like he thinks he's in a silent movie. I'd like him discouraged." "Where are you?" I gave him the cross streets. "You want him identified or simply removed from your vicinity?" "Both," I said. "Preferably in that order, but I'll take what I can get." "Stay in public," Saul said. 5 minutes. I hung up, stepped back onto the sidewalk, and started walking toward the nearest place that offered crowds and confusion. New York is obliging that way. 2 blocks later, I ducked into a small bookstore. Narrow aisles, dusty hardcovers, the kind of place you go when you want to feel intelligent without reading anything. I wandered to the back and pretended to examine a book on Italian cookery, which felt appropriate. Basil had gotten me into this. Basil could get me out. A minute later, the bell over the door jingled. My follower entered. He moved too slowly, scanning with his eyes instead of letting his body do it. No, amateur. Then, from the front, another man entered. Mid-40s, ordinary face, ordinary coat, ordinary walk. So ordinary, he almost disappeared. Saul Panzer had arrived. Saul didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He drifted down an aisle, paused near my follower, and spoke softly. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw the reaction. The follower stiffened as if someone had poured cold water down his spine. His eyes widened, then narrowed. Then he glanced around with sudden caution. Saul's voice stayed level. He didn't raise it, didn't gesture. He simply spoke the way Wolfe speaks, like the world is obliged to listen. The follower mumbled something. Saul said one more sentence. The follower's face went grey, and he turned and walked out of the bookstore without buying a thing, which in that place was probably a felony. Saul drifted to my aisle, still not hurrying. He stopped beside me as if we were two men bonded by our shared interest in Italian cookery. "Who is he?" I asked, eyes on the cookbook. Saul's mouth barely moved. "Name is Raymond Voss. Low level. Works occasional jobs for an outfit that does private security for businesses." "Which business?" "That's the interesting part," Saul said. He didn't know. He got a cash payment and a photo. Your photo. "From whom?" "He claims a woman hired him through a third party. Dark hair, expensive coat, didn't give a name." My mind clicked. Lila Brodsky fit that description like a glove. But she didn't need to tail me. She could have just thrown me out, unless she was tailing me to see who I spoke to, or to see whether I went to the police. "Did he mention a location?" I asked. Saul nodded slightly. "He was told to follow you until you entered a specific building. If you did, he was to call a number. He didn't know who would answer." "Which building?" Saul gave me the address. My stomach tightened. It was not the Brodsky residence. It was ours, the brownstone, and I felt the air shift around me, even among the dusty books. Somebody had planned for me to go home and be watched while I did it. Wolfe hates intrusion the way a cat hates water. "Saul," I said, "I want that number." Saul slid a scrap of paper into the cookbook like a bookmark. "Already have it." Voss gave it up easily once he realized his employer wasn't going to protect him from me. I smiled. That was Saul's version of humor. "Any idea what Klein's role is?" I asked. Saul's eyes finally flicked toward mine, sharp and quick. "Klein is nervous. I had a man watch the shop after you left. Klein made a call, then went into the back and opened his desk drawer. He removed a small amber vial." "The oil." "Likely," Saul said. Then he put it in his pocket and left through the rear exit. "Where to?" "Unknown. We lost him in traffic." That made me mutter something impolite about traffic, fate, and operations managers. Saul said, "You want coverage on your house?" "I want it anyway," I said. "But Wolfe will want to know they plan to watch me enter the brownstone. That's provocation," Saul supplied. "Or confirmation." "Right." We left the bookstore separately. Saul vanished into the street like a man who had never existed. I headed straight home, because now the tail wasn't behind me. It was ahead of me, waiting at the door. When I got to the brownstone, the stoop looked normal. The street looked normal. That's the trouble with normal. It's a disguise anyone can wear. Inside, Fritz met me in the hall, hands folded, expression neutral. "Mr. Archie, Mr. Wolfe is in the office." "That's where he always is," I said, "unless he's in the dining room." "What's new?" Fritz's eyes held mine. "There was a visitor." "A visitor who rang the bell?" Fritz nodded. "No, a visitor who did not." That chilled me more than the February air outside. I walked into the office and found Wolfe seated behind his desk, and as expected. The basil pot was still there, occupying the corner like a sullen witness. Wolfe's eyes were fixed on it. "Archie," he said without looking up. "Before you speak, answer this. Has someone been watching our house?" "Yes," I said. "And better than that, someone paid a man to watch for me to enter it." Wolfe's eyes lifted, slow and dangerous. "Proceed." I told him everything. Brodsky's story of loyalty tests, Klein's denial and nerves, the tale, Saul's identification, the phone number, and the fact that Klein had removed the amber vial and bolted out the back. Wolfe listened without a flicker. When I finished, he sat for a moment in silence, hands steepled. Then he said, very softly, "They have moved the game to my door." Fritz appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Wolfe," he said quietly, "there is another matter." Wolfe didn't turn his head. "Yes, Fritz?" "The spice cabinet," Fritz said. "One of the jars has been moved." Wolfe's eyes went to the basil pot again, and this time they were fully awake. "Which jar?" he asked. Fritz's voice was steady, but his face had tightened. "The basil." For 3 full seconds, nobody spoke. In the brownstone, silence is not unusual. It is curated. This silence was not curated. It had teeth. Wolfe did not rise. He never rises for drama. But something in his face altered. Not alarm, not fear, but offense. Personal offense. "Explain," he said to Fritz. Fritz stepped fully into the office. His posture was correct, but there was color in his cheeks. "I was preparing the veal for this evening. I reached for the basil jar in the cabinet beside the stove. It was not in its proper position." "Not in its proper position," Wolfe repeated. "No, sir. It was 2 inches to the left, and the lid was not aligned with the label." That would have meant nothing in another house. In this one, it meant intrusion. "When did you last use it?" I asked. "Yesterday," Fritz said, "for the sauce at luncheon, and I returned it precisely." "You're certain?" I said gently. Fritz gave me a look that would have frozen boiling water. "I'm certain." Wolfe's fingers pressed together. "Has anyone been in the kitchen?" "No, sir. Only myself. And Theodore, briefly, to ask about the cheese delivery." Theodore Horstman, our orchid assistant, would sooner misplace his own head than a jar in Fritz's kitchen, and he would certainly not survive the attempt. "Show me," Wolfe said, and that was as close to urgency as he allows. We went to the kitchen together, Wolfe moving with deliberate heaviness, Fritz ahead, me at his shoulder. The room smelled of stock and simmering restraint. Fritz opened the cabinet. The jars stood in their neat rows, labels facing outward like obedient soldiers. The basil jar, clear glass, handwritten label in Fritz's tidy script, sat slightly off the line. I leaned closer. The lid was twisted just a fraction from perfect symmetry. "Oh, you see?" Fritz said quietly. "I see," Wolfe said. He did not touch the jar. He simply observed it, then turned his head slightly toward me. "Archie." I removed a handkerchief from my pocket and used it to lift the jar carefully. The weight felt normal. I unscrewed the lid and brought it under my nose. Basil. Clean, sharp, familiar. "Smell?" Wolfe asked. "Smells like basil." "Only basil?" I inhaled again, slower. Underneath the green scent was the faintest trace of something else. Not strong, not obvious, but it tickled the back of my throat. "There's something," I said. "Very faint. Not metallic. Not sweet. Just wrong." Fritz's face went pale. "Place it on the counter," Wolfe said. I did. Wolfe leaned slightly forward, nostrils flaring almost imperceptibly. He closed his eyes and inhaled. For a moment I thought he might dismiss it as imagination. Instead, his eyes opened slowly. "Not culinary," he said. Fritz made a small sound in his throat. "You did not leave the house today?" Wolfe asked him. "No, sir. No deliveries? No visitors?" "Only the butcher. I received the order myself." "And he did not enter the kitchen?" "No, sir." Wolfe's gaze shifted to me. "Archie, when you left earlier, did you lock the front door?" "Yes." "And the rear?" "Yes." "The windows?" "It's February," I said. "Unless someone tunneled under the foundation, they didn't come in that way." Wolfe's lips compressed. "Says someone entered this house?" The statement hung there, heavy and undeniable. "Or," I said carefully, "someone with access to the key." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "The key," he repeated. "The one Sloane gave me," I said. "The key to Brodsky's house. We assumed it was unique. What if it wasn't?" "You propose," Wolfe said, voice very quiet, "that Mrs. Brodsky, or another, had a duplicate made of our own key." "I'm proposing that someone anticipated I would return here after visiting Klein," I said. "No, they arranged surveillance. They knew I'd come back, and they wanted to confirm it." "And while confirming," Wolfe murmured, "they trespassed." Fritz gripped the edge of the counter. "Mr. Wolfe, the Basil—" "Will not be used," Wolfe said sharply. "Seal it." Fritz nodded and fetched a small tin from a drawer. I poured the contents of the jar into it carefully, using the handkerchief again. The leaves rustled softly as they fell, innocent and dangerous. "Saul," Wolfe said to me. "Already on it," I said. "He's covering the house." "Call him. Double it." I moved to the wall phone and dialed. Saul answered immediately. "Yes." "They came inside," I said. "Kitchen. Basil jar moved. Possible contamination." A pause. "Then, how long were you out?" 2 hours. "Any sign of forced entry?" "None." "Then someone had access," Saul said. "Or skill." "Either way," I said, glancing at Wolfe. "We want eyes on the house 24 hours. "You'll have them," Saul said. "And I'll start with the number Voss was given." "Good." I hung up and turned back. Wolfe had not moved. He was staring at the sealed tin of Basil as though it had personally insulted him. "This is escalation," he said at last. "No argument," I replied. "They placed an agent to observe your return," Wolfe continued, "and while you were absent, they entered my home. They adjusted a jar in my kitchen." "It could be symbolic," I said. "A message." "Basil started this." "Yes," Wolfe said softly. Basil." Fritz spoke carefully. "Mr. Wolfe, if it is poisoned—" "It is not poison," Wolfe said. "If they intended to kill, they would not have announced themselves by misalignment. They wanted us to notice." "To unsettle you," I said. "To provoke response," Wolfe corrected. He leaned back slightly, massive and contained. "We will not respond with panic." "Good," I said. I left my panic in the bookstore. Wolfe ignored that. "Archie, recount Mrs. Brodsky's exact words regarding the blend." I did. Her insistence on no oil, her suspicion of tampering, her breaking of the pot. "And Klein," Wolfe said. "He denied toxicity." "Yes, but he removed the vial and disappeared." Wolfe nodded slowly. "There are now 3 possibilities. 1, Mrs. Brodsky lies. 2, Klein lies. 3, both lie." "Comforting," I said. "Additionally," Wolfe continued, "someone believes that introducing Basil, real or symbolic, into this house will influence me." "It has," I said. His eyes flicked to me. "It's made you angry," I clarified. A faint shift at the corner of his mouth might have been agreement. "Good," Wolfe said. "Anger clarifies appetite." Fritz blinked. Wolfe's gaze returned to the sealed tin. "Archie, tonight we will dine without Basil, and tomorrow we will invite Mrs. Brodsky, Mr. Klein, and Mr. Sloane here." "All at once?" I asked. "Yes." "That'll be cozy." "It will be controlled," Wolfe said. He folded his hands again, composure restored. "They have disturbed my brownstone, they have tampered with my kitchen, they have presumed to use Basil as a lever." His voice dropped to something almost gentle. "I will now determine who believes they can season my house to their taste." Dinner that evening was basil-free, which in our house is like a cathedral without incense. Fritz compensated with thyme and a restrained amount of rosemary, but the absence was noticeable. Wolfe noticed everything. He ate in silence, not brooding. Wolfe does not brood, but consolidating. I've seen that look before. It's the look of a man rearranging pieces on a board no one else can see. After coffee, he wheeled himself back to the office and said, "Archie, we will not wait until morning." "I thought you wanted them all here tomorrow." "I do, but I require one preliminary adjustment." "Which is?" "Mrs. Brodsky's assistant," he said. "Daniel Rourke." "You mentioned him." "Yes. He knew of the private order." "According to her." "Indeed." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "If Mrs. Brodsky wished to test loyalty, she would tell at least one person of the test. Otherwise, there is no subject. You're suggesting she seeded the information deliberately." "I am suggesting," Wolfe said patiently, "that she wanted someone to know, and if the blend was altered, she could then observe reaction. And if it wasn't altered, she would have confirmed fidelity." I leaned back in my chair. "That's a risky game." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and she's not a timid woman." I considered Brodsky's composure in her kitchen. She hadn't flinched at the mention of blood. She hadn't protested the broken pot. She had been offended, but not surprised. "You think she expected tampering?" I said. "I think," Wolfe replied, "Hans, that she expected something." "And the oil?" He nodded once. "The oil is the pivot." Just then the phone rang. I picked it up. "Goodwin." "Saul," came the quiet voice. The number Voss was given traces to a prepaid line, recently activated. But there was one outgoing call after he dialed it. 2, an office in Midtown. Law firm. I felt a small tightening in my chest. Name? Dent and Harlow. I didn't bother to cover the receiver. "Philip Dent," I said to Wolfe. "Brodsky's attorney." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Continue," he said to me. "To Dent's office," Saul confirmed. The call lasted 30 seconds. "Meaning a confirmation," I said. "Likely." "Anything else?" "Klein has not returned home. We have a man outside his apartment. No activity." "Good," I said. "Keep it that way." I hung up and turned back to Wolfe. "So," I said, "Brodsky's attorney is connected to the surveillance on our house." "Yes," Wolfe said softly. "Which suggests the surveillance was not an impulsive act by Klein." "Then why watch me enter here?" I asked. "To see if I'd involve you?" Wolfe's gaze rested on me. "Precisely." That landed. "They wanted to confirm that Nero Wolfe was engaged," I said slowly. "Yes." "And once confirmed, they entered the house." "To escalate," Wolfe said. "Or to warn." He considered that. "If warning, it was inelegant. They adjusted a jar in my kitchen. They introduced foreign scent, so they assumed I would detect it." "You did?" "Yes." We sat in silence for a moment, the shape of it forming. "Brodsky hires us indirectly," I said. "Or at least sends a key knowing Sloane might panic and seek help. Her assistant knows about the test. Klein adds oil without her authorization. Then Klein bolts with the vial. Meanwhile, Dent's office monitors whether I come back here. Once I do, someone slips in and tampers with our Basil." "Yes," Wolfe said. You summarize competently." "That's high praise." He ignored that. "The oil may not be poison. It may be something else entirely." "Such as?" "Marker," Wolfe said. "Signal, catalyst." I frowned. "Catalyst for what?" "Fear," he said. That settled into me. The oil in Brodsky's blend. The misaligned jar here. The subtle, wrong scent. "Someone wants people to believe their kitchens are compromised," I said. "Yes." "Why?" Wolfe's eyes closed briefly. "Control." There it was. "If Mrs. Brodsky believes her internal operations are corrupt," Wolfe continued, "she becomes vulnerable. If her staff believe she suspects them, loyalty fractures. If we believe our house has been penetrated, we react. And someone benefits from that reaction." "Exactly." The phone rang again. I answered. "Goodwin." A male voice, low and tight. Is Mr. Wolfe there? Who's calling? A hesitation. Daniel Rourke. I raised my brows at Wolfe. Put him through, Wolfe said. I handed over the receiver. Mr. Rourke, Wolfe said calmly. You have something to say? There was a faint hitch in the voice on the other end. Yes, Mrs. Brodsky doesn't know I'm calling. Then you should speak quickly. I think I made a mistake, Rourke said. About the herb order. Wolfe's tone did not change. Explain. I told Mr. Klein about it, Rourke said, before the order was placed. My spine straightened. You informed him of Mrs. Brodsky's test, Wolfe said. Yes. I thought it seemed harmless. He's operations manager. I assumed he should know. And did he instruct you to do anything further? No, he just listened. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me briefly, then back to nothing. Why are you calling now? Wolfe asked. Because, Rourke said, voice thinning. Mr. Klein came to see me tonight. When? An hour ago. What did he want? He asked whether Mrs. Brodsky had contacted any outside party, specifically you. And you told him? I said I didn't know. Wolfe's voice went colder. Did you? I might have implied it. Of course he had. Mr. Rourke, Wolfe said evenly. Where are you now? At my apartment. Remain there. Do not admit anyone. If Mr. Klein returns, you will call Mr. Goodwin immediately. Yes. The line clicked dead. I looked at Wolfe. He's scared, I said. He should be, Wolfe replied. You think Klein's desperate? I think, Wolfe said slowly, that Klein believed he could manipulate suspicion between employer and staff. And when he learned that I am involved, he accelerated. And the Basil in our kitchen? Wolfe's eyes settled on the sealed tin on his desk. A declaration, he said. Klein wishes to demonstrate reach. Or Dent does, I said. Yes, Wolfe agreed. Or Dent. The pieces were tightening now, not scattering. Brodsky's loyalty test, Rourke's loose tongue, Klein's oil, Dent's surveillance, the intrusion here. Tomorrow's gathering, I said. You still want it? Wolfe's mouth curved very slightly. Was more than ever, he said. Outside, the city carried on with its usual noise, unaware that in a quiet brownstone kitchen a jar had been shifted 2 inches and a game had moved from speculation to strategy. Mrs. Lila Brodsky sat erect, composed but watchful. Daniel Rourke perched at the edge of his seat, looking as though he expected the floor to open beneath him. Calvin Sloane clutched his hat in both hands, pale but determined. Eamon Klein stood rather than sat until I suggested, gently, that gravity applied to everyone equally in this room. He took a chair stiffly. Philip Dent, immaculate in a dark suit, regarded the proceedings with the faint irritation of a man who prefers conference rooms to brownstones. Wolfe remained behind his desk, monumental and still. The sealed tin of Basil rested near his right hand. The broken ceramic pot sat to his left, its crack like a scar under the lamplight. No one spoke. Wolfe prefers silence to bloom before he prunes it. Finally, he said, "That you are here because each of you participated, actively or passively, in a sequence of events involving a basil pot." Dent shifted slightly. "Mr. Wolfe, my client—" "Will not speak yet," Wolfe said without raising his voice. "You may consider this an educational interlude." Dent's lips pressed thin. Wolfe's gaze moved one by one across the faces before him. "Mrs. Brodsky," he began, "you devised a test of loyalty. You arranged a private herb order outside normal channels, and you wished to determine whether your operations manager would tamper with it." She inclined her head slightly. "Correct. You informed your assistant, Mr. Rourke." "Yes." "And Mr. Rourke, in a display of either naivete or misplaced allegiance, informed Mr. Klein." Rourke flushed. "I didn't think—" "No," Wolfe said. "You did not. a faint tightening around Klein's eyes. Wolfe continued. Mr. Klein, having learned of the test, chose not to leave the blend untouched. Instead, you added a proprietary oil infusion. Klein's jaw hardened. There was nothing harmful in that oil. Perhaps not, Wolfe said mildly, but it was unauthorized. You wished to observe whether Mrs. Brodsky would notice. Klein leaned forward. She was looking for betrayal. I gave her something to find. Indeed, Wolfe said. You manufactured the evidence of tampering in order to control the narrative. Mrs. Brodsky's eyes flashed. Control it how? By demonstrating that you could alter product without detection unless you chose otherwise, Wolfe said. A subtle message. Operations passed through Mr. Klein's hands. Klein opened his mouth, then closed it. Wolfe lifted the broken pot slightly, then set it down again. However, Mr. Klein did not anticipate that Mr. Sloane would retain the key and later retrieve the discarded pot. All eyes went to Sloane. I only, he began. You panicked, Wolfe said. Understandable. Says when Mrs. Brodsky's attorney contacted the company, you feared exposure. Dent spoke smoothly. I contacted them to clarify irregularities. Yes, Wolfe said. And to ensure documentation. You then arranged surveillance of my associate to determine whether Mr. Sloane would seek outside assistance. Dent did not deny it. He merely adjusted his cuff. When Mr. Goodwin returned to this house, Wolfe continued, your surveillance confirmed my involvement. Mrs. Brodsky turned sharply toward Dent. You had him watched? For your protection, Dent said evenly. If Mr. Sloane was attempting to leverage information, he was not, Wolfe said. He was frightened. Silence. Wolfe rested his hand on the sealed tin. Now we arrive at the matter of the basil jar in my kitchen. Klein stiffened. Dent's gaze flickered. After confirming my engagement, Wolfe said, someone entered this house and adjusted a jar of basil. They did not poison it. They did not steal. They misaligned. He let that settle. This was not random vandalism. It was a message, a declaration of reach. Klein's voice was tight. You can't prove that. Wolfe turned his eyes on him. I do not need to prove it. I need only understand it. He folded his hands. Mr. Klein, when you added oil to the blend, you intended to unsettle Mrs. Brodsky. When she broke the pot and escalated through her attorney, you realized the situation might extend beyond your control. Klein's face was pale now, and you feared exposure of your broader manipulation, Wolfe continued, because the oil was not merely an assertion of authority, it was also a marker. Mrs. Brodsky's voice was low. Marker? Yes, Wolfe said. A harmless aromatic compound, subtle, persistent, detectable only upon close inspection. You've been introducing it in small quantities into select shipments. Klein's lips parted. That's absurd. No, Wolfe said. It is strategic. By adding a unique aromatic signature, you could later claim contamination or purity at will. You could discredit competitors. You could create doubt. Dent stared at Klein. Is that true? Klein's composure cracked. It wasn't illegal. That is not the same as ethical, Wolfe said softly. Mrs. Brodsky's expression had gone very still. When Mr. Goodwin visited your shop, Wolfe continued, you removed the amber vial. You feared analysis. Klein said nothing. You then learned that I was involved. And in a final attempt to assert dominance, you arranged entry into my house and adjusted my basil jar, using the same aromatic compound. A slow, controlled breath moved through the room. You wished to demonstrate that no kitchen was beyond your reach, Wolfe said. Not Mrs. Brodsky's. Not mine. Klein's voice was hoarse. You have no proof I entered your house. I do not require confession, Wolfe said calmly. Your surveillance connected to Mr. Dent's office. Mr. Dent acted to protect his client. You acted to protect yourself, but only one of you had motive to intimidate me. Klein's shoulders sagged. I didn't poison anyone, he said weakly. No, Wolfe agreed. You trafficked in doubt, in subtlety, in fear. Mrs. Brodsky rose slowly. Mr. Klein, she said, her voice steady and lethal, you are dismissed, effective immediately. Dent half rose. We should discuss. There is nothing to discuss, she said. You will handle the legal ramifications. Klein looked as though he might protest, but the weight of the room had shifted decisively against him. He stood, glanced once at the Basil tin, then at Wolfe, and left without another word. Rourke looked shattered. Sloane looked stunned. Wolfe inclined his head slightly toward Mrs. Brodsky. Your internal tensions are real. Address them openly. Suspicion breeds precisely the behavior you sought to test. She nodded slowly. I see that. Dent gathered his papers, silent now. When they had all gone, the office felt larger. I leaned back in my chair. So it was never about poison. No, Wolfe said. It was about leverage. And the broken pot? A casualty of pride, he said. I glanced toward the kitchen. Fritz will want to purge every spice in the cabinet. Unnecessary, Wolfe said. We have identified the compound. It is benign. Still. Yes, he said. Still. He closed his eyes briefly. Now, Archie. Yeah? Basil is a delicate herb. It requires care, consistency, and respect. It does not thrive under suspicion. That's philosophical, I said. It is practical, Wolfe replied, in kitchens and in commerce. Fritz appeared in the doorway. Dinner is ready. Wolfe's eyes opened. Does it contain basil? No, sir, Fritz said firmly. Very well, Wolfe said. As we moved toward the dining room, I glanced back once at the broken pot on the desk. A cracked container, a misaligned jar, took a faint scent where it didn't belong. Some people use violence to make a point. Others use seasoning. In the brownstone, at least for now, the air smelled clean again. And that was as close to justice as Basil was ever going to get.